All right, here we go.
What's good, everybody? I'm Robert Dickens Jr.
This is Ryan Reed.
This is Elanders Frazier.
This is John Gaal, and you're listening to Volta.
Changing the conversation
For percussion educators,
Designers,
And performers.
What's up, everyone? This is John Gaal with Volta Percussion. I got my great friends here, Ryan Reed, Elanders Frazier, and of course, the Robert Dickens Jr., everybody. Say what's up to our listeners, guys.
What's up? What's up?
Hello, everyone.
what's up, guys?
More control today.
Just want to thank everyone for listening today. Tonight's podcast, or today's podcast, I guess you could say, is The Impossible Dream. Just kidding. The Impossible Gap. And the question of today is, why is good so easy to achieve, but greatness is just that much more difficult? Who wants to start us off in this conversation, amigos? Why is good easy, but why is great hard? Are we talking from a teaching perspective or from a performing perspective with students?
Ooh,
Yeah, that's.
I didn't even think about the performers' wishes in this. Like I completely disregarded performers. Like I wrote them off. I wrote them off like my taxes. Like I completely disregarded them. Just threw them out. I'm sorry, performers. That was not my intent. I didn't even think about you. I'm sorry, Ryan. I feel like Ryan, you gotta jump on this, man.
Ryan, you need to start it off, man.
This is all you, man.
All right. Well, John brought up a really good question of, it being from the performer aspect or from the teacher aspect. But I think to start it off, I think when you first look at a season or first look at starting an instrument, like when things are brand new, like progress comes so much faster when you're learning new skills or new music or new whatever, because there's an excitement about it. There's like this newness that's like, I can't wait to play with the new toy I just got to bring home or whatever, or the new puppy that we just brought home. So like kids get excited, and I think educators are excited to be like, all right, this thing is fresh. It's time to dig in. All this stuff, like we can work out the kinks that were in the system from last year, yada, yada, yada. And there's a newness about it. So progress comes easier because you're at ground zero. Like you're building whatever you're building from scratch. So there's a foundation of information, unless you're talking about beginners. But everything is new about that season or about that piece of music or about that level that you're at, whether it be a grade level, whether it be a college level, a teaching level, whatever. But I think that newness makes it very easy to like get excited and to be like, ooh, this thing, this is the thing, this is the thing, this is the thing. I learned a thing, I learned a thing, I learned a thing, I learned a bunch of things. And then as you get better at the like less complicated things of a season, and I'm right now, we're recording this and it's, we got about 3 weeks left in the WGI season. And it's kind of where I'm at with my group is the newness has worn off, for both me and the kids. And it's like, all right, how do we go to level? Obviously we're in 2021, we're in the virtual season. My group has never done WGI before, and last year was my first year as director, and we got to do an indoor show on February 1st and an indoor show on February 8th. Then we got down 3 weeks before our next show, or 2 weeks before our next show was going to be, because we had a huge gap in our season based on band events and whatnot. So last year we were still discovering new stuff, and now our show is done and we're like, all right, we got to make the push to do this. We qualified for semifinals. That was exciting for the kids, but now it's like, all right, we got to be really good to take that next step, to either make the finals or to make it to whatever, or just to be the best that we've ever been. And the kids are finding out that when you've never been great before, or even if you have been great before, it's hard to repeat that process. Because if you don't know what the process is, you only know what as good as you've ever been is. And if you have done the process, you know how much work that is that you then have to repeat the process on. That has a lot to do with it, good being easy to achieve and great being hard. Is that good is it's new, it's like fresh, it's exciting, it's romantic almost, and then you're like, all right, we got to get in and grind it out here to go from good to great. And sometimes that's hard depending on the maturity of the performer or of the organization or of the group or the culture.
I would definitely agree with that because, as we talked about earlier, or I think we were talking about before we actually just started recording, when you start, you do suck so bad at what it is that you're doing that it's like, if you can fix your grip and like not have space between your thumb and index finger, like that's like great. You know what I mean? Like you can play eighth notes and play 8 on a hand at 150. Wow, that's really good. And it's actually in time. Like I know how to do this and I'm not getting yelled at. Like that's a big accomplishment. But I think that one of the things that is the most difficult is the fact that in the beginning, you do have all this external support. You have all the instructors, you have your community, you have all these people that are driving you in order to get you to this end. But then the further you go up, the more the desire has to come from within. The more that desire has to be driven by you as an individual and not the circumstances themselves. I think we can all say that this is something that we experience if you've ever auditioned for a drum corps, a WGI group, or any type of world-class organization. You know, when you were in high school, you had your instructors pushing you, hopefully, to be your absolute best. You know, you had your parents, you had, your band directors, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But the more you try to excel and go beyond your individual area, and you started to go beyond that and to go into, this world of drum corps where now you're one of 70 snare drummers that are auditioning, like there isn't anyone there to push you to be like, you can do it. Like, this is great. Like you're making a whole bunch of progress. Like, it's just you. And you're the one that has to push yourself to beyond the fact that you're better than everybody in your area. But on a large scale, you're probably just good. You're probably just a good snare drummer. You're probably just a good keyboard player in the grand scheme of things. Maybe you were great on that level, but now the next level that you're trying to go to, you have to become great on that level. So I feel like that's one of the most difficult parts of that. I would say as an instructor and as a performer, that was difficult for me is that I had to provide my own gas the further I get along. Like I can't depend on my community and everybody else to be cheering that this is going to be great and that I can do it. They're not in the audition process with you. They're not designing the show with you. They're not, going to championships and going to critique and all this other kind of stuff with you. Like you have to provide that gas the further you get there. And I think that can be a daunting process for anybody to be that disciplined to say, I'm going to stick with it. Like, even though the progress gets slower as you get closer to becoming really great at something.
What's that analogy? The, big fish in a small pond. I felt like that's what was always said when I was growing up. Like, once you graduate high school, you may be good where you're at right now, but as you want to go to the upper leagues, keep in mind you may be a big fish in a small pond, but it's kind of like you're being dropped into the ocean now, where you might have been a hot shot here. Now you having to compete with so many other individuals. I guess when I try to look, I have to use my own experiences to kind of see this gap play out. Like I look at the first independent group I tried out for, to experience this gap. And I thought I was good, but I wouldn't say that I thought I was like, I didn't think I was like good. I just thought I was good. You know what I mean? I gave myself a solid A. I wouldn't say A plus. I wouldn't say A minus, but I say a solid A. You know what I mean? But when I went out for my first independent group, it was in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. I wouldn't say Hattiesburg, Mississippi was known for like, this stellar talent. It wasn't like Riverside, California. It wasn't UMass. It wasn't, who else was drumming? It wasn't Nashville. Like I wasn't going to like this known hub for marching percussion at the time. Even though Hattiesburg had USM, it wasn't known for indoor percussion. It might have been known for college band, but I wasn't going to a college band audition. I was going to an indoor percussion audition at the time. It was a brand new indoor percussion group. So going to that audition, I thought I had just as good a chance as anybody else. Little did I know, a lot of people showed up there that had a lot of experience, a lot of drum corps experience, college band experience, indoor experience. People came from everywhere because to that point, it was new, and there were a lot of kids that showed up too that were in the same boat as me that were good. They didn't know what indoor was about, but they had the necessary skills to find out what it was about and determine their own worth to keep going forward. And what that season, I did end up making it, but what that season taught me, to Rob's point, was that nobody was going to push me to get better. I had to push myself. And I was that kid that was like in a corner by myself drumming every night because I could not stand being the weakest member in a place that I didn't know anybody. When I say I didn't know anybody, me and my friend drove, who was a cymbal player, from Florida to Mississippi. We didn't know anybody there. And I was the only person in the snare line. There's one other kid that I recognized that went to a high school across the road from me, but we were rivals. So it's not like we were friends. I just knew him because I knew his face. But I didn't know anybody else. So it's not like people didn't want to drum with me because they didn't know me. I was a big Blue Devils fan. Everybody was Vanguard fans. So like nobody really, you know what I mean? Like it was tough being there until I got to know everybody. But like through the audition process, I was an introvert. Wildly, a lot of people say, you talk a lot. I talk a lot once you get to know me. When I don't know anybody, I'm very closed down. Like I'm very to myself, very quiet. And I was an introvert. So like I was in a corner with a Met drumming. And I didn't find out probably until like, man, it probably had to be, I don't know if Tony will hear this or not. It probably had to be like a decade after that Tony Lyman, and he was the director of the group. He told me he knew right then and there that he was one of the guys that he's going to take a chance on me because he saw I was one of the only kids in a corner with a metronome, with a drum pad, drumming during the break. He said, that's the kid that we need. That's one of the kids we need in this group. He's like, I know he ain't got all of it, but that work ethic is what we need in this group. And, that's not, for me, it's humbling to hear that, but that's all I knew to do. I didn't know anything else to do. I was terrified. I didn't want to get cut. I didn't know anything else to do because, like, to Ryan's point, like, how do I, it's like you feel like you're in a situation where you're holding on for dear life, Like, you're trying to go from good to great. You don't know how to get there. You don't have anybody else to guide you to that point. So all you know to do is to do what you know how to do, and time. I got a lunch break. I can drum during the lunch break. I got a dinner break. I can drum during the dinner break. We got a drum during rehearsal. I got time. I may not have the necessary skills that everybody else has, but what I do have is I have an extra 15 minutes. I have an extra 20 minutes. I have an extra 30 minutes. I have an extra hour. I have this time before we have lights out. You know what I mean? That's something that I have that, if utilized well, may possibly give me an edge. And that's one of those things, like, from an experience standpoint, when we talk about like going from good to great, that's one of those things that for me, I always felt like was the thing I was never afraid of doing. And what I've always told my students, never be afraid to do. If you are the type of student that is never afraid to outwork your competitors, you've always got an edge. If you're never afraid to outwork your competitors, because people are lazy. And I'll say that very honestly. And I'm sorry for anybody that's listening that don't want to admit it. I'm lazy now. But, I will tell you, I lost a lot of sleep when I was young because I was relentless and ruthless. I was that dude that was up until 4 a.m. with a metronome in a garage, sweating myself to death because I wanted to get those taps lower. I wanted to get those accents higher. And it was important. And I was not going to let somebody else do it. It was going to be me. And even if that only got me just a little bit further than the next person, it was going to be me. And that's just the thing. It's all about how bad are you willing to work for it? And some people will say, well, what if that still doesn't get me to where I want to go? And the question is, at a certain point, the work that you're putting in, and I always say this, the work that you're putting in, it has to be coupled with two things, right? You have to have the work, but then you also have to have critique. You can't have the work without the critique, but you can't have the critique without the work, right? Because the work without the critique, you don't know if you're heading in the right direction. But the critique without the work, you can have all the right information in the world, but if you ain't working on nothing, you're not getting better. You know what I mean? You can't get better if you got a bunch of, you take notes all day long, but if you never work on it, you're not going to get any better. You know what I mean? But you have to have some level of critique. And that's why, it's like, I see a lot of people that, in the off season, I love the Instagram, culture. I love the Instagram culture because it gives people an opportunity to get that critique now more than ever before. I wish when I was auditioning back in the day, I could have had people watch me drum months before I went to go audition for a group and see what I looked like and give me comments and send videos to folks. Man, you know how great that would have been? My options was sending a VHS tape. And you know what? I didn't have a camcorder. My silly behind probably would have done it. I probably would have sent videos to people, but I'll be honest. We were broke. I did not have a camcorder. And when I was auditioning, we didn't have a camcorder. We had a camera. I couldn't take pictures.
Disposable.
Yeah, taking snapshots. We didn't have a camcorder.
You gotta take it to the drugstore to get a film developed.
Yeah, I mean, I always, I I'm always distraught by that from my childhood, that I have no videos of myself when I was a kid because my family, we didn't have a camcorder growing up. So we have a lot of pictures, but we don't have any video of me as a kid because we never had a camcorder. I've got one video of me like when I was in 8th grade because they did like this news reel thing of me in middle school or something like that. And that's the only video I have of myself as an adolescent. And conveniently enough, Lynn, my wife, was also in that newscast, and we've got that on VHS. It's so crazy. We can't wait to show it to Ava because it's got both her parents as 8th graders in a newsreel, it's so random and it's so crazy. Which I always say that's why we're meant to be, that we just so happen to both be in this newscast together as 8th graders. But that's the only video I have of me as a kid. But take video, man. Like the video options that students have now to be able to see themselves and be able to send it to people and just say, hey, can you check this out and let me know what it looks like? What am I doing? How can I improve? That stuff is invaluable now. And there's no reason why you can't get that honest feedback and critique, even if it's one comment. One comment is better than none. I felt like we were fighter pilots flying blind back in the day. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Just hoping on a wish and a prayer. You know what I mean? But, we made it happen. And we made it happen because we were making progress between camps, We would get that critique, we get that feedback, we go home, we get on that hustle wagon, and then we come back and show that progress, But it's like now, one of the things I think is that, and I'm switching it now from performer to professor, right? Now I think instructors expect more out of students because they have that instant feedback. I think now instructors expect more out of students because they can see themselves, they can see that video, they get that honest feedback because it's so immediate now. So now as a teacher, it's like, not only do I want you to be able to do this, I want you to be able to do this, because you should be able to clean it faster because you can see yourself, you can see every mistake. And sometimes we got to be careful about the overload of what we give students, because yes, they can see all that, but there's only so much that the human brain can absorb and retain. The human brains haven't gotten faster in 20 years. I'll be honest. I don't think the human brains have gotten faster. Technology has gotten faster. The human brains really haven't changed much. Hands have gotten faster. Music has gotten faster. Work ethic has gotten marginally slower, worse,
Would agree.
So maybe we should just not put as much on students. And I'm speaking to myself included, I think we have to have a conscious awareness of what our students can handle. And that's just being honest with myself about being an instructor, and I think we've said that in the past, about thinking through what our students can handle. And if we just take the opportunity to think about what can our students handle, and if we want them to go from good to great, we've got to know what they can handle in each of those steps to get them to that point, because we can be holding up that progress as well and not even realize it because we're not planning effectively.
I think also as an educator, speaking of finishing what your thoughts are, Elanders, is knowing that if we don't have the information for our student at that time to help them get to that next level, we have to maybe sometimes remove ourselves from the equation and present other instructors of a higher caliber for that particular instrument or genre or style of music that students interested in learning more about, and provide those connections, networking opportunities by removing ourselves, knowing full well that we've taken the student as far as we can based on our own experience or whatnot, and now passing the reins off to someone else. You guys really talked about it a lot from a performer standpoint. A few topics on educator standpoint. I want to just mention one thing from my own perspective, from an educator's perspective, of why we stay in the good area. Why is it so hard to get students to that great area? I think for educators, and again, depending on your situation with how long you've been with your program, the type of culture you've created, et cetera, with the variables we've already talked about on previous episodes, is that we tend to focus as educators probably on the big fires, and it's easier to put out the big issues and see that growth like Ryan was talking about earlier, of the students, because we're fixing those big issues right off the bat. And that's why it's easier to stay in that good area, I guess you could say, when you're teaching students, because you've already cleaned maybe their technical side or their rhythmic understanding or their note accuracy or whatnot. You fix those big issues. Like a student comes in, they have no idea how to mark time. Or a student comes in, you worked with them in middle school, but now they have never carried a drum, or they've done a marching band show. And so you're just getting from point A to point B for the season. You nailed it. You stay in that area of good because you're only cleaning the fires that you could see. The hard part getting to that next level is taking it to maybe some more abstract thinking, that higher mentality state, that higher caliber of performing, of, okay, now that we know how to hold the stick and now we know how to read music and count the rhythms, how do we add that next level of musicality, of phrasing, of depth, of showmanship, right? The higher nuances in the performing aspect, because those things aren't as tangible or as easily seen on the outside when you're teaching or instructing, because those developments in students are a little bit more inward thinking, inward motivated. Like Rob, what you said, changing students' motivations from extrinsic to intrinsic, right? Getting the student to actually want to take it to that next step, and little kind of taking, from an educator standpoint, taking your hands off the reins, letting the students lead the conversation, lead their own educational pathway. It's hard to reach that area of greatness because a lot of times that area of greatness is not seen, because that happens behind closed doors with the work ethic that Elanders was talking about, with the midnight practicing. It's really hard to see that incremental steps. But again, taking it back, if as an educator, time, we talked about time, being able to see where you were with that student from, let's say, beginning of August to now in May, taking that step back and getting our viewpoint further back, I think it's easier to see how students can transition from that general goodness to that, okay, and they're taking it to that next level of greatness. It does take time. And we don't see it every single day when we're in the thick of it, right? But getting that bird's eye view, exactly, like Elanders said. So going back, it's hard to move on from good to great, because we're always putting out the big fires, what we see, and the things that take it to that next level are not as outward appearing. So I just want to share my thoughts on that. Just don't get discouraged. Keep pushing on.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as an educator, it can be difficult to do that, because it may expose things that even we're working on as teachers, because as teachers, as designers, as arrangers, we always want to be on the edge of our game too. Like, we always want to find that edge of, like, what can I actually teach these kids how to do? And I think that it has to come back to why we decided to do it to begin with. Why we decided to do music to begin with. one of a friend of mine and high school instructor always says, he always told us this in high school and I never got it until later on. He was like, I don't do this for the mainstream. You know, I like, that's not the reason why I decided to do music. I didn't decide to march drum corps because everybody understood what that meant or what the music was about or what the shows were about or what the activity itself was about. And I think that that's part of what I get from what John is saying is finding those higher levels past good and past just notes and rhythms and past just playing the masterworks for the sake of saying that we're playing them. It is that abstract thing. And it does take us somewhere beyond what it is that we've experienced up until that point, which makes us have to ask new questions, which makes us have to get outside of our comfort zone. And in some ways, it makes expose us with regard to our students. You know what I mean? That, hey, this person doesn't know everything. Like, oh, he had to rewrite the drill because this was too hard, it didn't work. Or, oh, he asked us to do this and we had to, I think that's what I see. That's a challenge as an instructor is, are we even allowing our students to see us be creative? Because the creative process and the process of trying to be great at something is going to be messy. Like, do our students get to see us learn and see us figure things out and work hard at something and then realize, okay, that doesn't necessarily work. It's not working the way that I thought it was going to work. Now I'm going to have to do more work and just figure it out and move around so that, we can fix this. And I think that that's something that they can learn from us, that maybe sometimes we may not give them the opportunity to do that because we're always trying to be in the seat where we know everything. We got it all figured out, because to me, I feel like one of the most humbling parts of being an educator, and especially for those that might go from being a performer to being an educator, is that your resume as a performer literally means nothing. Like, it really doesn't mean a lot when you become an educator, because it's like you could just be another great person that was in some great line, but it doesn't mean that you know how to teach. You know what I mean? When you come back over here to being an educator, now you start back at like ground zero of like, okay, yeah, I was a world-class this, blah, 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 in this ensemble. But when it comes down to teaching, I'm like back on, level zero. And I have to figure out, how can I make myself just as good of an educator as I was at being a performer? And not get stuck in the, oh, back in my day, I did this or I did that, or none of that stuff matters when you're not able to be good at what it is that you're doing now. And if that's being an educator, then you need to find, like, how can I find my edge and how can I find what I need to do and who can I call to figure out what to, get to those next levels. And one question that I wanted to ask Elanders is about specifically about that being a director and trying to go from those different levels, because I know that you've had groups, indoor groups that have been successful regionally, locally, as well as nationally. Like, what was that process for you like, being that you've never had a group make Scholastic World Finals or this finals or whatever? Like, what was that process like for you trying to go from this is the best that I've ever done as an educator to something that goes far beyond that?
I'll be very honest. It was terrifying. Because in the situation that I was in, I was 23. It was me and one other instructor. Me and a front ensemble instructor, I think I might have had a visual instructor that dropped in from time to time. He was a guy that wrote the drill, but he was a band director from across the city that was friends with the band director of the school. So he would travel with us on show days, but he just came in and wrote the drill, and he would come in and to rehearsal every now and then. That was the first year where we did really well. It was kind of terrifying though, being good. You always want to be good, but it's kind of to Drake's end. If you're at the top, then somebody's always gunning for you. And it's terrifying you when you're at a show and you get called a 96 and you're wondering like, who got a 96? You just got a 96, huh? What? We're in first. What? Who in first? We are, huh? Huh? You know, you looking around like, huh? You know, and then you got to go to critique, and the judge is like, wow, you know, giving you all this great commentary, and you know, when you're in the lot, it's business. You just trying to clean what you know. And you know, it's funny because for the kids, it's the same old, same old. I'm at the hotel trying to keep these knuckleheads from running around the hotel with towels on. Teenage junk. Meanwhile, they at the show popping a 96 for playing clean rolls. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the normal stuff that happens. But I'm having what's the word? Existential crisis as a young instructor trying to navigate, what can I do now to make this group better than what they are, amidst being told you're already good. Right? This is the conversation we're having. You're already good. How do you become even better? Because this was the conversation that got said was, you're great, but I got to tell you, you're probably about to get bumped to Scholastic Open. And we won that regional in Scholastic A with a 96. And this is the last regional of the year. It was the Nashville regional of that year. And they said between now and championships, more than likely, you're probably going to get bumped. I can't say it here, you know, like as a definite, but I've seen just about every other A group in this country, and your level's ahead of them. I just don't see how it's not going to happen. I'm just like, I don't even like, it's not like I had like a group of people to talk to, you know. I'm just like, what do I do? Sitting there with my other instructor, her name was Yolanda. We were just sitting there just like, what do we do? It's two of us. Like we're literally doing everything that we know how to do with this group. We are maxing, like as instructors, we are maxing out our potential with this group. If we get bumped to open, what do we do? And literally that week, I got a phone call from the director of WGI giving us a heads up. We need to see a video of your group to review. And we sent a video to review, and then we got a call like a couple days after that to let us know that we were getting bumped. And I begged and pleaded and argued about why we should stay. And when we got pushed, I don't know if, you know, I reached out to everybody I knew that had taken open groups to finals and tried to pick their brains with what videos we had already had circulating to see if they could give us input. We tried to make edits. And It didn't happen. We didn't make finals. We didn't even make it out of prelims. We didn't make semifinals. It was kind of sad. And I think the lesson that I learned that year was that small changes. Just it's like a radio dial, right? When you're trying to just find the station, you got to just tune it. Just can't go like this when you're trying to hear what they're saying. You got to just do just small little turns until you hear the voice peaking. And I think we had started making massive, I rewrote the drill to the closer, like, we rewrote the drill to the closer. I added like we rewrote the ending to the show, rewrote a whole like triangle movement. So we had like a triangle solo in the middle of the show. Like we were trying to do these things to like amp it up to make it open class, and that was on me because I didn't know any better than to try to compete with groups. And what we should have done was just try to stay the course and let our show speak for what it was with clarity against those other groups. You know what I mean? That's what we should have done. We should have just tailored down and said, if they think we're already open class, then we just need to be open class with what we have. And I don't know if I've ever talked to anybody about that. Man, guys, I brought it out. Rob, thanks. But redemption the next year. I think we graduated out that year, maybe 2-3 kids out of the front ensemble and maybe 2 or 3 kids out of the battery. Not very many. Double down. We stayed in open and we pushed. And we designed an open class show from Jump Street. And we started out the year with one purpose, which was we were already rehearsing at an open class level. Well, I felt like we were rehearsing at a world class level, but we had an open class group, which the year before we had an A class group. And our sole purpose was to try to we had to make it into finals, because not make it in the semis when we were first in the country in Scholastic A stung way too bad. And for us, it was about not letting that be the legacy of this group. And we had to rewrite that history. And we started that in the fall. I mean, it was like we had to rewrite it for the fall season. We had to rewrite it for the winter season. Then we started gung-ho. And we spent that whole, we just rewrote the entire story. And by the time we got into that winter season, we push. And we got to a point in the winter season where it was just going real bad. Everybody was fighting with each other. Section leader was upset with the whole group because he felt like nobody was, trying to do anything. And we had a big come to Jesus meeting, and we pushed everybody aside, and we came down to one centralized goal, which was it's got to be the group versus the staff, which is all of you got to work together to produce the product that you want to have. And it was still me and Yolanda. It was like, and we two are going to do everything that we have in our power to push you from this side. And we can't have any one individual out of you in the group deciding that you're going to step on this side of the aisle and point the finger, because you're still on the court. And you gotta lift each other up, because if you don't, it's not going to happen for you. And that's what was starting to happen. People were starting to jump on the other side and point at each other, stuff like that. And once that happened, it turned around. Now, granted, we did start having some very, very intense rehearsals. We were running. I ran with them sometimes. And what we started doing was we started putting ourselves in a mindset of, what is it going to take for us to get off the bus and nail a show? Like first time. What does it take for us to get off the bus and nail the performance the first time without fail? Like we've got to knock out a run if the bus breaks down. We got to be able to come in the arena and nail the run. Because we understand in open class, it's going to be 3 runs. It's going to be prelims, semis, because open class had grown that year. Like it went from it used to be like 12, 15 groups to where the next year it just jumped to like 40 groups in open class. That was when open class just exploded. So now it was like all of a sudden it went from prelims, finals to prelims, now semifinals. So when open class started growing. And that year, their prelims run, fire, popped a 90 in the prelims run, went soaring into semis. So proud of them. Even better run in semis. Headed into finals in fifth place in open class, and remained in 5th place in finals, and came out in 5th place in finals, held on to 5th place in finals. So coming from first in A, not making it into semis, going into championships, and then being in 5th place in open, because sometimes you got to get your pride hurt to push your story forward. But I think what we learned through that process was that in order to go from good to great, you got to know what you're good at. You got to be okay with what you're good at, and you don't have to chase anything. And I think that's the biggest lesson that I learned. We were trying to, that previous year, I think I tried to chase being what open class was instead of just being what we were and doing us well. Knowing what we were good at and doing us well. Being okay with what I was able. I was creating the shows. That next year, I was the brainchild of the shows, doing the design, and I wrote the drill and the music and stuff like that, and creating the shows and stuff like that, and being okay with that and running with it and making edits and tweaks and stuff like that, along the way. Me and Yolanda wrote the book and stuff like that, and being okay with it and just letting the students figure out things as they went along, and then being okay with cutting stuff, like that. I learned that lesson too late. Like we cut the snare solo out that year. You know how hard it was for me to cut the snare solo out of one of my shows? When I tell you this, like, look, we had them come out on the court during the rehearsal. We said, all right, we got the snare solo, we got the bass solo, and we got a drum set solo. 2 out of 3's getting cut tonight. Y'all got 3 reps each. Me and Yolanda sat in the stands and said, all right, go. And they all 3 played them 3 reps in a row. And then we said, snares, bass, you're cut. Drum set, you got it. And then I rewrote the drill that night on the spot. We reworked the drill, figured out how it worked, and cut the snare solo and the bass solo out of the show. Sandwiched it together. Only thing was left was a drum set solo, and the show just clicked. You got to be okay with that. Like I said, your pride has to go. And that's one of those things like John was talking about, like in the practice room, like and Rob was saying, like when it gets messy, when your pride goes, it's getting messy. You talk about people getting upset when you cut stuff out that's important. You know how many reps them kids probably worked on them breaks for it to get cut in like late March? But sometimes that's what the show needs. But your pride has to be out of the way. It's for whatever is going to make the best product at the end of the day. And as long as everybody is aligned with what is the best product at the end of the day, and they can go back and watch the show and say, man, that is seamless. They won't even remember what it was before because it's seamless from top to bottom. It doesn't even feel like it was there. I can't even find a repetition of the show where it used to be on YouTube anymore. You wouldn't even recognize that it used to be. I could point it out to you, but it's seamless now. You know what I mean? But I learned so much about myself in those few years there. But fear, it's tough. And I feel for everybody that's at the top of our activity. And for the ones that have gotten complacent, don't get complacent. You got to stay hungry. You got to keep moving. You got to figure out what that dial is that's going to continue to press you forward. Don't do it at anybody else's expense, but you got to figure out what that dial is that keeps you pressing forward, but it does get messy to continue to create new things, to stay innovative. So
Whew, man, I definitely felt you when you talked about cutting stuff, because I feel like everybody, or I know at least I've gotten in the habit of the past 2 or 3 years that after the first 2 shows, the kids know, like I have that conversation where it's like, hey, this is the rehearsal where something that you really liked might be about to get chopped. Like, it's okay. Just prepare yourself mentally. And I think it's important that as instructors and as designers, like we keep that in mind. Is like, man, you have the right to change your mind at any point in time within the benefit of what you feel like is best. Because like you said, I mean, there's always going to be some point where this is what I want to put out. This is what I want to communicate. I'm going to stick with this. Because if you do try to just play the game, you're going to be playing the game a lot. And you're going to get one judge that says, keep this. And the next judge says, keep that. Like, which is something that for a later podcast episode, actually how to interpret, this critique from judges and people that are seeing your shows once, you got to know what's important and what's just someone's opinion on what they want. So yeah,
we can definitely break that down into further detail, because that's a whole lot we need to flesh out.
And I would say to that point that it's all opinion when it comes to the judges. Like there's some training, but that goes on in the judging side of things and whatnot. But at the end of the day, like they're rendering their opinion based on what they caught, not what you know about the group. And and I think one of the biggest things that hit me when Elanders was talking was, when you get moved from one classification to another classification or anything like that, like the idea of having to make wholesale changes. Because I was not the director of a school that was in a similar situation a handful of years ago, but I was an instructor on that side when we got bumped from A to open right before World Championships, and we're like, all right, this has got to be harder, 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 and then it ended up not working out for us in terms of like a placement side of things, but I think the hardest part of chasing greatness is that you have to be honest with yourself too, in terms of like, is this, not every group is going to be able to chase greatness, and as a instructor, as a director that goes on for a long period of time, you're going to have groups that just don't have it. And it's not that they don't want it. They just don't have the tools. And that's, you graduated a lot of seniors, whatever. You have a bunch of age outs if you're on the independent side of things, and the recruiting is poor. Hell, look at the situation we're in right now with 2021. Like, we all got kids that are doing, if you're in school, you got kids doing the virtual thing. Like, maybe they're not coming in for their ensembles or their indoor group or whatever. Like, you're just rolling with the punches. But I think you got to be honest. And I'll take this from a conversation I had with my students a couple of weeks ago. We had just finished up our second local virtual show, and we were getting ready to submit to WGI. And I was like, all right, like what do you guys want? And this whole year I've taken the approach of it's a super young group, so I want to push them, but I also don't want to push past what they can handle and break them, because once that's like, I won't get them back until next year, if that. I just sat down with them and said, hey, I think you guys have the potential to be really special. I understand that our history of our program doesn't have this. You've never been pushed this hard. I can give you everything that I can give you to put you into concert A finals and to do this, but is this something that you're willing to do? Because if they're not willing to do it, doesn't matter how good a teacher you are. If the kids ain't willing to work for it, you can't out teach that. You can't outwork a bad diet. You can't outwork bad work ethic, or you can't outwork non-existent work ethic. So we just had the conversation, and they're like, we want to get pushed. And since then, it's been game on in all of our rehearsals. And I noticed a change in the kids. Because before that conversation, I was stopping rehearsal like, all right, you got to look at me while I'm talking to you. We got to do this thing. We got to remember this thing. You got to look at me when I'm talking to you. Hey, get off your phone. And then we had that conversation, and it's like, occasionally I'll tell a kid like, hey, get off your phone. But like they've dialed in because we had that honest conversation. I don't think that's something that happens a lot, that if you bring your kids into that conversation, and that's scary as an instructor to be like, hey, you guys could be really good. Or to have the other conversation where it's like, hey, we don't got it this year, but this is where we can be. I think the kids are willing to do more when they know where they sit versus like, all right, he's pushing us really hard because he's a dick. I don't think they always understand. It's like, no, we're getting pushed really hard because he believes in us. And that's something that I've gotten better at teaching kids, telling kids, not teaching kids, but telling kids this year, is that like, in the pursuit of greatness, like I believe in you having the capacity to be great, but there's got to be a trust. I think that is honestly the hardest part, in that developing that trust in each other to be great. You know, because you can tell kids all you want, like, you can be great, you can be great, you can be great. No, here's the honest to God facts. And after that conversation, again, we did our WGI regional, we did our next show, and you saw it in the kids' performance, and you saw it in the scoring sheets that we got, where we jumped high box 3 all the way up to high box 4. It wasn't like we get a whole performance, we just moved into like, this is our goal, and this is what we're going for. And I think it helped dialed in everything else. So I think if you're chasing greatness, maybe have those hard conversations. Be like, this is what I think we can do, but is this what you want? And when you put the ball in the kids' court, they're more willing to step up to the plate.
Yeah.
You know, whereas like, I know how good you can be. You got to be good now. And then I just get to sit in the stands and mix, guys. That's it.
Yeah.
Fair point. Yeah.
That is so beautiful just to see that play out and to see that get validated in a way that the kids can understand. I had a similar experience this past weekend, because, you know, we made a lot of changes, and my kids understood that this is part of the season where you get better, you get buff. So we started doing a lot of push-ups and a lot of just, okay, we're gonna blow that. All right, cool. Let's hold ourselves accountable here. Let's just go ahead and get 10 more. Like, even at the show, like, they had a bomb of a warm-up. It was awful. And I had to, you know, stop and be like, y'all, we're gonna promise each other right now that we're not gonna do push-ups in this parking lot. Like, we're gonna promise ourselves that we're not going to. Of course we did push-ups in the parking lot. That's what we did. But I don't think they cared. When they scored, you know, high box 4, they was like, hey, well, you know what? Ain't so bad. I think I'll take those push-ups in the parking lot again, Mr. Dickens. Just give me a few more. Maybe we can get the box 5. So I mean, I was excited just to see that. And I think that, like you said, Ryan, like, I think when it clicks in their head that it's like, we actually can do this. Like, we can actually be the best in our class. We can, like, eclipse our own limits as a group, you know, then they start to, you know, drive that themselves. And I feel like that's the most beautiful thing, is when you come in and you see, like Elanders was saying, like, you see that kid that's in the corner with his Met and just like, hey, on breaks, this is what I'm doing. Like, water breaks, okay, I'm grabbing a pad. Like, 2 people over here drumming through this stuff. Like, we're not on our phones on Snapchat and this, that, and whatever. No, we're still in rehearsal. Like, when you see kids finally, that starts to dial into their brain, that's the beautiful part that I think for me, I'm still searching for as an instructor, is like, how do I inspire that level of greatness in my students consistently so that they catch it and they just, you know, they go on with it.
Still searching for it. I'm still searching for it.
I don't think the search is ever going to end.
Yeah.
Because every year we restart as instructors and as performers. We it's the reset button. We got kids that graduate. You know, we got kids that age out. You got a new group, new show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Was this everything that you hoped it would be, John? I love messing with John.
Well, I think that kind of concludes our conversation for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in to another podcast episode with Ryan Reed, Elanders Frazier, Robert Dickens Jr., and of course myself, John Gaal. For more conversation tips, tricks, questions, we like to keep the conversation going. You can always email us at voltapercussion@gmail.com. You can also check us out, Instagram and the multiple video audio listening software platforms that we're on, such as help me out, guys, because I forget this all the time.
We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. Buzzsprout.
Okay, I was gonna say that.
We've got an account with Buzzsprout, but look us up at Volta Percussion.
See, there you go. See, I passed the range from good to great to Elanders, and he completed my sentences.
I like that.
Thank
full
you,
circle.
sir. Direct application, direct example.
It's too good.
Well, once again, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Peace.
See ya.